Perfect. But now welcome, Emily. We're very excited to have you. I will keep the intro very short. You can say a few things about you because we're already late. But Emily is actually part of the Alma Me team. She's a coach on the side, quite experienced and works herself, did a PhD and works in biotech. And she will share some tips and tricks on biotech and how you can break into biotech. Emily, the floor is yours. A pleasure to have you.
Excellent. Can you see my screen, the PowerPoint?
We can see the PowerPoint, but you didn't start yet
Yeah, no, I
the
just wanted to
slideshow.
make sure
Oh
you
yeah,
saw
no,
the
we
PowerPoint.
do,
Yeah.
we do.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Great. All good. All right. All right. Now good?
Perfect,
Okay.
perfect. The floor is yours.
Okay, great. Thanks for the introduction, Elena. I'm excited to be here to share my insights on how to transition from academia into industry and how, like, what a hiring manager is looking for when you apply. So a little bit about me, just very briefly. Did my undergrad at Connecticut College, degree in biochemistry. Then I went to Yale for my PhD in genetics. Then was at Harvard Medical School for a postdoc in breast cancer signaling. Then my first industry job was at a company in the Boston area called Kronos Bio, where I was a discovery biology scientist there for 4.5 years. And during my time there, I had two direct reports. One was a research associate, and one was a PhD level scientist. And then when that company closed last year, I had to search for a new job. So I can empathize with a lot of you who are on the job market. I just went through that and started last summer at a company called Argenta Therapeutics, also in the greater Boston area. And as Elena mentioned, I'm also a part time career coach with Alamy. Just a little bit of kind of like what I've done kind of behind the scenes of kind of my academic track. I've been very interested in biotech from the beginning, so I've kind of inserted myself in various capacities. When I was in grad school, I helped co-found the Yale Biotech Club, and I was, one of the organizers of the inaugural career fair there that catered towards graduate and postdoc life science trainees. And then when I moved to Harvard, there was already an established Harvard Biotech Club and kind of rose up through the ranks and became one of the leaders of the club and it creating different initiatives to connect trainees with biotech professionals in the Boston area, and also was the leader of the annual career fair that we had, which was about 25 to.
Emily, someone muted you. I'm so sorry you got muted. I don't know what happened.
When did you stop hearing me?
You were just talking about the biotech club,
Okay, great.
actually, and how you got
Okay,
a leader, how you became a leader.
okay, great. All right, yeah. So, was at the Harvard Biotech Club. It launched different initiatives connecting trainees to biotech professionals. Also led the organization of the career fair, which generally was about 25 to 30 companies. And then in my last year was about 50 companies. So it was a really big deal. This was an in-person career fair. Hundreds and hundreds of people came. But then all along the way, I was also a mentor to life science grad students, both at Harvard and at Yale. And this was just a real big passion of mine. And I really just love sharing my academic experiences and now my biotech experiences with people who are kind of looking at that transition, both kind of in their early stage of their academic career, and also who are ready to go on the job market. So I'm really excited today to kind of talk about my insights into this process. So the first takeaway I have is that biotech is a team sport, and so every scientific program within
Huh?
industry, especially,
I'm gonna use
is
in
there
the room down the hall. I got my phone real quick.
okay. Um, every scientific program in industry brings together experts across different fields. So I'm a biologist, so I was always in the room with either including myself, a biochemist, a chemist, a computational biologist. So you're all working towards the same goal, which is helping patients. So it's really important when you're making that transition to industry to highlight those opportunities where you were part of a collaboration. whether that was in the academic setting or industry setting, can be, within your lab, across other labs. Just really important to highlight that part in your resume, and then also in your interview. This is just really important. However, one caveat is that when you are talking in an interview setting, you do want to make sure you use the word I to talk about the projects that you led, to demonstrate that you were the ones initiating and leading those projects. Okay, so second takeaway, be concise. So in your resume, you may be this may not be great news, but recruiters spend less than 10 seconds on each resume, and hiring manager probably maybe only slightly more. So you need to make it count. You need to make it really well formatted. So use the bold feature, bullets, clear formatting to guide the eye. So you want to have someone be able to really find the important points, which are your skills, your research experience. No, unusual fonts or colors. You just got to keep it professional, keep it simple, no run-on sentences. You just got to, you don't want to lose a job opportunity because your resume was poorly formatted. Um, Within the interview setting, you want to keep your answers fairly short. The first question maybe is a little bit longer because they'll ask you, why are you applying for this job and what's your background? Um, the other important part of this is the interviewer wants to have a conversation. You don't want to provide a monologue. And they wanna know, are you a good fit for their team? And so part of this is making it personal. Share your story of, why you're in this field, like, why are you passionate about, the field that you chose, even if it goes back to childhood. Just this creates a really great connection with the interviewer. Like, you're talking to a human, and so you just wanna have a really great connection and make it memorable for yourself and for the interviewer, because the more memorable you are to the person interviewing you, the more likely you're gonna stand out among the other candidates they're talking to. So they're just trying to find a good fit for their team, and so you don't wanna just come off as robotic. You just wanna treat it as like you're talking to someone in a coffee shop. So just, keep it simple, and really just, make it personal. And so again, the recruiter and hiring managers don't spend a lot of time on your resume, so you gotta make every word count. And so with that, I want to talk about a little bit about what I look for in a resume, in an interview. And so this kind of recaps what I was just talking about. So when I've been part of the hiring process, or been hiring someone myself, again, I look for kind of like a clean, concise, well formatted resume. If your resume is kind of all over the place, that just kind of, signifies that, it extends to kind of like your work ethic, your personality, and that you're maybe not an organized person. So you need to take really great care in your resume in order for me to kind of care and move forward in, looking more deeply into your resume and application. Um, the next thing that I look for is obviously the relevant parts to the job. So, do you have the relevant experience? Whether that's a PhD or a bachelor's degree. Do you have the lab skills that I'm looking for? When I was hiring, I was looking for someone with specific assay development skills. And that's really important to be able to hit the ground running when you come on board. And so obviously you might not have all the skills listed in a job description, and that's okay. But you want to have, a good amount of them. And so just kind of keep that in mind. Like, maybe like 60%, 60 to 70%, is a good goal to aim for. And then the other part, so my previous company was an oncology based company. And so I was looking for people who had research experience within the oncology space. Each field has their kind of own nuances in how the research works. And so whether that's oncology, neuroscience, immunology, those are very specific fields. And so I'm not a neuro person or an immunology person. So I would probably not apply for a role that were at companies that specialize in those disease areas. They're very specific, and, someone hiring is gonna want someone who kind of understands the nuances of those disease indications. Um, as you may have heard, throughout this week so far, in industry, the papers are not your currency to getting a job. And so while they're important to have, it's good to show that you know how to lead a research project. We're not, focusing, oh my gosh, she didn't have like a cell science Nature paper. So what is great to do is to, put all your publications in a Google Scholar link, and then just put that in the header of your resume. And then the recruiter or the hiring manager can go look at that, at their leisure. It is not a feature of your resume. So literally remove those from your resume and just put it in the link at the top of your resume. Also, your awards, well, I don't even necessarily, promote having the awards on your resume. If you really want those to be there, only have them for maybe the last 5 years. Like beyond that, don't care. We're really just focusing on the research experience and the skills, and not much beyond that. Like that's what we're a business. We're hiring for skills, hiring for a personality fit, and that's really it. Um, the other thing that I really wanna harp on is that if you're a PhD applying to a bachelor's level role, you will get an immediate rejection. When I was hiring for a research associate, I got so many, like, postdoc, even faculty people applying for these roles, and I immediately rejected them. This type of a research associate role is a very specific skill set, and a PhD is incredibly overqualified, and also, you will get bored, you will wanna leave the company, and it's very expensive to replace someone. And so, do not apply for a job that is beneath you degree-wise. It is a waste of your time and the company's time. So, just wanna really emphasize that. Um Within the interview setting, it's really important to show enthusiasm. Like, do you care about this role? And also, have you done the homework on this company? I remember interviewing a candidate for a role, a PhD level role, and on the phone call, this person was very monotone, and I was like, "Do you even care about?" I didn't ask her this, but I'm like, "Do you care about what you're like?" About this role. And so you want to show that genuine enthusiasm. And then I've also been, on interview panels where you ask if you have any questions about the company, and they don't even know what the company does. So you wanna make sure you understand the platform of the company and come ready with questions specific to the company, just to show that you're genuine interest in the company. Um when I was interviewing last year, I still asked some other types of questions, questions about the culture of the company, the team structure. I would often ask the person, like, what's your favorite part about working at this company? Those are totally fine because you want to make sure it's a good fit for you as well. So those are still, asking about the company because you're trying to understand, how do they work as a company? And, is that a good fit for you as well? So, um, so the resume structure that I would recommend, you know, you'd have your header with your name, personal info. But what's kind of unique to what I'm talking about here is kind of right below your name, have descriptors. So you can say like, research scientist, then have a line, then say like genomics, immunology. To kind of really, so like when a recruiter looks at your resume, they can immediately see, your specialties, and so that just makes it that much easier for them to be like, "Oh, yeah, this person would be a good fit. Let me look at a few more things below, in their research experience." Then also this is where you would put your LinkedIn and Google Scholar links. Then below that, I would have a very brief professional summary, kind of summarizing your expertise and like why you're passionate about what you do and why you're interested in the role at this company. Again, only a few sentences, but this is important because again, the recruiter can look at a few keywords in there and kind of know exactly who you are. And then directly below that is your skills and expertise. Like again, this is like the main focus of everyone's eyes when they look at a resume. They want to know, do you have the skills that we're looking for? And so, um, being a biologist, I put them in different categories, whether that's like cell culture and the different things in cell culture that I've done, or whether that's if you're a biochemist, you put like protein production and then the different kinds of things within protein production. And then, everyone usually has some sort of leadership and then, or like scientific communication, like if you've written papers, if you've given talks, presented posters, like that's scientific communication. So you want to have the categories and then like a few brief examples of those. So a recruiter or hiring manager understands specifically the types of skills underneath those headers. And then you list your professional experience. So this would be where you do list your postdoc, your grad school experience. But it's important to actually write like researcher or senior researcher. Don't list grad student because you want to, you are a senior level researcher if you have a PhD. So that is experience unto itself. So you want to like you're not trying to hide that you have a that you were a grad student or a postdoc, but you wanna make sure that, give yourself credit for your experience. So you can write researcher for a grad student or, senior researcher for postdoc. And then just include, the university, the dates that you were there. Again, and what I like to do here also is write like a one sentence summary of your project, like very high level. So someone can easily just look at that and kind of know what you did. And then you can have 3 to 4 bullets below that highlight the impact, the research that you did and the impact that it had, in your field, in your lab. Um, and so that's kind of how I would structure the professional experience. And then at the very bottom, again, this kind of goes against what many people are taught, is where you put your education. So then you can list, your postdoc, your PhD, your master's, your bachelor's degree below that. The goal is not to feature your education. At the top of your resume, you have, your name, comma, PhD, and that already tells the people that you have a PhD. You don't need to put the education at the top. Obviously important to list it, but it's not a feature. So that's why we have it at the end. And so here is just a quick example of what, a research experience is. I'm not going to go into the details, but just want to show you have the title of the university, you're a researcher, I have the years, I have a one sentence summary, and then a few bullets that are really descriptive and impactful to understand what research that I did. And so kind of a nice formula for those bullets is to have a verb, like an impactful verb, not just like contributed or, something like that. You want to have like a very strong verb. Then you have a what, a how, and a result. So that, it really kind of brings everything together. And again, you want to kind of quantify the impact to where you can. And so here is just an example of a resume, just so you can kind of see it all put together. We have the candidate name at the top. I have, research scientist, molecular biology, functional genomics, gene editing. Again, a recruiter can quickly look at that and kind of know if they should keep moving forward in reading your resume. Again, professional summary, very brief, describing the experience and why you're interested in science in this role. And then the skills. Again, we have kind of the headers and then specifics underneath each of those. And then we have the professional experience, listing, each of the roles that you've had, and then all of the different impactful, um, research that you did within those experiences. And then at the end is where you list your education. So again, not a prime real estate for education. You put it at the end just to show, these are, I do have a PhD, I do have a bachelor's degree, and this is where it was. And so, something that I want to highlight that is something people don't realize, and I didn't really realize it myself until kind of doing some more research, is that a majority of roles are filled through networking and referrals. And so they're not even visible to the rest of us. Like whether it's, a promotion that a company has to post for, but it's not really an opening, or, this has happened to me where my previous company said like, we're opening this role. Do you know anyone? Let us know. And so like it barely goes on the market. Like it's just not really a thing, even if it goes on LinkedIn. And again, referral. So like I would, get a referral from a friend, for a role. And so the you're, if you don't have kind of the connections, you're competing with the people who do have connections. And so that kind of leads me to my next part, which is networking. It is so critical to network. Um, if you are not, constantly, making those connections, whether you're at a panel, you're at a networking event, you're at an event like this, if you are not, reaching out to them, LinkedIn connecting with them, if you are not, outreaching to the right people, you will not be seen. These are how people get jobs. It is really important to not just kind of spray applications everywhere. It's really important to be strategic in your job applications and, find people at those companies, preferably the hiring manager, and do a strategic outreach and explain, these are, the, skills that I have, and the experience that I have that I think would be helpful for this role. You know, would you be willing to chat? And so having that outreach is really important, and what I tell a lot of my Alma Me clients is it's really important to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. People, get scared about doing like just cold outreach, and I totally get it. But the worst thing that can happen is they just don't respond. And, that's not a big deal. And so the best case scenario is they're like, yeah, happy to help. It's just there's no risk involved. Um, and then in order to kind of expand your network, like I mentioned, attend networking events, career fairs, panels where, you can Google wherever you live, and I'm sure there's some sort of networking event that you can attend. Um, the major thing that I did with my job search last year and also when I was first on the job search 6 years ago was informational interviews. Um, these are where you can just connect with people at the company just to learn about the company, even if there is no role available. Because what happens, and this happened to me twice, is when I would, met them for coffee or on Zoom, and then maybe like a month later, they're like, "We have an opening. Are you interested?" And so like they already knew me, they already could vouch for me, and while I already had accepted jobs at that point, I was grateful that they thought of me, at that moment to kind of let me know that there was an opening that was relevant to my skills. And kind of how I recommend doing this is, first making a list of companies that you're interested in where you think your research experience matches well. Um, and then find those second connections, at those companies where you might have a primary connection that has a friend at that company. And then you reach out to your friend and be like, "Hey, can you connect me to your friend at this company?" And then they make an introduction, and then you set up like a Zoom call, coffee, if it's local, whatever it is. Most people are very happy to share their experiences. I can attest to this. So I was connected to someone through a friend last year, just to kind of, make that connection. And then, a few months later, I got a job elsewhere. And then a few months after that, he reached out to me. He's like, "Hey, my company just closed. Let me know if you see any openings, where you have connections that could be helpful to me." So it flips really easily in biotech. While you might be the person helping them now, in a few months, the roles could totally reverse. And so everyone's just really happy to help each other because you never know when you're going to be the one that's needing help. So just you got to be comfortable with being uncomfortable and reaching out. Like you got to advocate for yourself. Um, and this allows you to really build genuine relationships. And then, you have these people in your network for life. Like you make that connection with that informational interview, and now that person is in your network where you can ask them for a referral for a company. And so you just create this really large web of a network that can just really be so incredibly powerful. Like you have no idea who's going to be that person who helps you get you that next job. And so that's I just networking is like one of my biggest things. And I just want to really emphasize that because it can just make or break, your chances of getting that interview. And so, kind of one of the last things I just wanted to touch on is your online presence. And so, LinkedIn, as many of you have probably used and have a love-hate relationship with it, it is a big tool that recruiters use, and so you want to make sure your profile is optimized for them to understand who you are. So, a lot of people, in their headline just say like PhD candidate, postdoc, scientist. That's not very helpful. So what you want to do is have a more descriptive header where you write, say, cell biologist, drug discovery, assay development, so they have a better understanding of where your expertise is. And then again, kind of like in your resume, have impactful statements describing the research that you've done. And then, as Elena's kind of mentioned just before this, engage with the content on LinkedIn. Comment on stuff you see. Pharma news that you see. Share your insights. Follow the companies that you're interested in. That's a big one because if you follow the company, and they make some announcement on their LinkedIn page, you'll see that in your feed. And so if they're like suddenly posting a job, you'll see that in your feed. Um, and then, as I mentioned before, create a Google Scholar profile and add that link to your resume header. Um, we don't need to see your publications on your resume. And so I just want to close with some key takeaways. The first, again, be concise. Recruiters really only have a few seconds to decide if they want to, move you to the next stage. So really format it well. Every word is important and must earn its place. The next part, again, teamwork. Biotech is cross-functional. You're working with people who, are across different disciplines, different expertises, and a company wants to know that you're a good collaborator, a good team player. So you want to highlight that in your resume and in your interview. Also network early. That, you're all here to kind of, start networking and making connections, so that's great. So again, make sure you're networking, you're reaching out to people, reaching out to your contacts to get connected to, contacts at relevant companies. That's just so important. And it's so easy. You can literally sit at your computer, make a little spreadsheet, and then kind of work your way down the list and ask your friends to connect you to various people. And if you don't have a connection at the company of interest, just cold message them. A lot of people are just happy to respond. Perhaps, upgrade to that LinkedIn premium so you can message, people that you're not connected with. It works so well, and, again, worst thing that happens is they don't respond, and that's okay. You took that risk, and, the reward so much outweighs the risk of just reaching out to someone. And again, optimize your presence on LinkedIn. Make sure you have a profile that where someone can just easily see, what your expertise is. And kind of lastly, make sure in an interview setting, you're showing your enthusiasm for the role, for the company, for being present in the interview. I know it's a nerve-wracking situation to be, in an interview setting, but, as much as you can, pretend you're in a coffee shop, but also, you know, be prepared with, real questions about the company. And also just don't be afraid to tell your story. As much as you might think it's silly, that's what makes it personable and real. Like the hiring managers are real people, and they would just wanna see if you're gonna be a good fit. So, one of the things that I, tell people is, like, put yourself in the hiring manager's shoes. Like, if you don't wanna, again, hear a monologue, you just wanna have a conversation. And so if you kind of, like, do a kind of a mental role reversal, you might kind of be like, "Oh, yeah, that makes sense. They don't wanna hear me just talk about my skills for 5 minutes." So you, again, just kinda make it personable, make it a conversation. And I think that's it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Emily, for a really comprehensive insight on how to, get hired in biotech, and also echoing a lot of things that I actually talked about. I think networking is probably gonna be the word of the careers week. And yesterday we also talked about creating your own opportunities, and the examples that you brought, how you reached out, how you had informational interviews. I wanna also kind of tell the story that the reason why we're sitting here together is also because you've sent a LinkedIn message to Alma Me and we responded. So there was never a role for a career advisor, but we were in a growing phase and you just came at the right time. So this is how you can create opportunities for yourself. And I think Emily is such a great example. So she lived what she's actually preaching, really. And I know we don't have so much time for questions, but there's one question, Emily, that I would really love to bring forward. And Emily, also, just so you know, everyone who is interested to learn more about Emily, I will send in the follow-up email again also her LinkedIn along, so you can always follow and connect with her. But there is one question that I would like to ask you, how you think people could address this, because I know it's such a common issue, and it also got 13 likes, so I think a lot of people are interested in getting an answer to the question. So, Emily, how do you get out of the loop overqualified, underqualified? In my case, with basic research experience and intention to transition to clinical research, internships allows me to learn, but I'm overqualified. And junior positions, they anyways require previous experience with specific technical skills I do not currently have. And therefore, I'm underqualified. And I feel no one is really focusing on my transferable skills. What do you think? How can we get out of this?
Yeah, so let me see if I can understand the question. So you're looking to, like, you have a PhD, but you're looking to be more on the clinical or translational side. And so while you have the degree, you're, underqualified from the actual, role you're trying to apply for skills wise. Is that kind of it? Maybe?
Mm,
Yeah, I'm
yeah,
not sure if I'm
I
totally
think we
understanding.
Yeah, I think we can. I also don't. I'm not entirely sure, but maybe. What do you think in general? Because maybe we can make it a bit more general. Some people feel overqualified, or as either overqualified for many roles or underqualified for other roles. Do you have any tip on how to
Yeah.
position that?
So, just a couple of quick thoughts. So, if you're, coming from like, regular PhD lab, postdoc lab, you kind of have to go with the skills that you have. And so if, you're looking to kind of make a transition to maybe a more translational or clinical role or even BD for that matter, you really need to get the job first that matches your skills. And within a company, talk to those people already in those roles, and they can kind of be your mentor and guide you. And then maybe over the next couple years you can transition to that role. Like in my previous company, someone was in a finance role, but she had some experience in clinical and probably also sought some mentorship, and she switched to a clinical role within the company. So she went from finance to clinical. So that was really interesting. um there was another thought. There was another part to that. Um, uh, um, Shoot. But yeah, I mean, you wanna make sure you have the skills. And no, in terms of, like, creating opportunities, so, like, if you're a PhD student, biologist, and you don't have cell culture experience, that is gonna be a major issue because 'cause you're competing with everyone who has cell culture experience. And so, one avenue is a postdoc, which again, no one really wants to do a postdoc in that situation, but and it's hard to create those internship opportunities after you have your PhD. So, you might have to, pursue some sort of postdoc kind of role or scientist role within a university setting to kind of bridge that gap, if you will. I don't know if that was helpful.
Yeah, I think the main point there, and I think this is true across all industry roles, you don't want to do what we call a double pivot. When you're
Yeah.
trying to do a double pivot, that's often where you get the overqualified,
Yeah.
underqualified trap happening. And so you want to make sure that you're using either your subject matter expertise or your technical skills at
Yeah.
a minimum in the role
Yeah.
that you're trying to transition into. If you don't have either of those for the role, the likelihood of you being hired is slim to none. And it's important to recognize that if you're just trying to make the leap, sometimes you're going to have to do a transitional role first before you
Yeah.
get where you want to be. So it might be a multi-step process. So
Yeah.
with that, Elena, I think
Exactly.
we need to move forward. But I've got Irena who I can bring over and add to the spotlight. Thank you, Emily, so
Thank
Thank
you,
you,
much for all
Emily.
everyone.
your insights.
Have a
Thank
great
you,
day.
Emily.
Bye.